The job ad looked ordinary enough. Overnight caretaker needed at Aspen Ridge Lodge, Rocky Mountain region, housing provided, competitive pay. I'd clicked it at 2 in the morning with a half-empty bottle of bourbon beside my laptop and no real sense of consequence. A week later, I was driving west on Highway 36, the thin winter light carving knives through the clouds, wondering if this was how people disappeared, quietly, on purpose. I didn't see the deer until it was too late. The brakes locked, tires screamed, and the truck spun sideways into a drift. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd hit it. But when the snow settled, there was nothing on the road, just the bent silhouette of pines, and standing between them, a man in a dark coat. He didn't move, didn't even flinch in the cold wind. When I blinked, he was gone. The engine coughed once and died. That was the moment I realized my life had officially reset itself to zero. I sat there for a long time, steam rising from the hood, staring at the map glowing on my phone. According to GPS, Aspen Ridge Lodge was less than 3 miles ahead, 3 silent miles through forest that swallowed the last bars of cell signal, the way the ocean swallows light. If I turned back, I'd freeze before sunrise. If I went forward, I might find work or something that looked like it. So I went forward. The lodge appeared suddenly out of the white, as if the mountain had coughed it up from beneath the snow. Enormous timber beams framed by stone walls, glass windows stretching 2 stories high, and yet everything about its proportions felt slightly wrong. The angles were too sharp. The doors too tall, the shadows beneath the roof too deep, as though the place had been built for giants who'd long since moved on. A single light glowed above the entrance. When I reached the porch, the door opened before I could knock. "You must be Ethan Cole," the woman said. Her voice carried the crispness of someone who had practiced calm for decades. "I'm Margaret Hale, but everyone calls me Maggie." She looked like the kind of person who ironed her flannel shirts. Tall, mid-50s, silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat twist. Something about her eyes reminded me of a nurse I once worked with during my paramedic years. Compassion carefully rationed, as though too much might be dangerous. Behind her, the lobby yawned wide, polished wood floors, a massive stone fireplace, and an emptiness that swallowed sound. "Long drive?" she asked. "Denver to here," I said. 12 hours, give or take a snowstorm." She smiled without warmth. "Then you're just in time. Dr. Lang is waiting." Dr. Victor Lang looked nothing like the scientists I'd seen in documentaries. No lab coat, just a charcoal turtleneck and an expression that never quite reached his eyes. He shook my hand firmly, studying me the way a surgeon studies a chart. "Former paramedic, correct?" "Until 6 months ago." "Good. People with crisis training adapt better up here, less prone to imagination." The way he paused before the last word sent a chill crawling under my collar. They led me through a quick tour: dining hall, supply room, generator shed, the monitoring office where I'd spend most nights. Every corridor hummed faintly, a vibration I could feel in my teeth. When I mentioned it, Dr. Lang said, "Old ventilation. The building settles when the temperature drops." It was 23 degrees. The building was humming like a live wire. By the time Maggie showed me my quarters, a small room at the end of the east wing, the sun was gone. The window overlooked an endless slope of pines, and beyond that, darkness that felt heavier than night itself. She handed me a thin binder. "Operational guidelines," she said. "Read them before midnight." I flipped it open. Rule 1. All exterior doors remain locked from sunset to sunrise. Rule 2. Cover reflective surfaces after dark. Rule 3. Do not acknowledge voices outside the lodge. Rule 4. Basement access strictly prohibited. Rule 5. Report all anomalies in writing before 6 a.m. I looked up. Anomalies. Unusual noises, power fluctuations, anything that feels off. Dr. Lang values precision. Then she smiled, just a fraction. You'll be fine, Mr. Cole. The nights are quieter here than anywhere else in Colorado. She left before I could ask what she meant by quieter. The first few hours passed without incident. I checked gauges, logged temperatures, walked the perimeter like a dutiful security guard. Somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m., the snow started again, fine powder drifting sideways across the floodlights. I made coffee, scrolled through an old playlist, tried not to think about how long it had been since I'd spoken to another human being voluntarily. At 2:47 a.m., the radio crackled. Static first, then a low whisper. My own name, drawn out like a sigh. Ethan! I froze. The channel light was off. The radio wasn't even powered. Then, from the fireplace behind me came 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I turned, expecting wind. What I saw instead stopped me cold. Inside the hearth, behind the iron grate, faint light flickered, like firelight. But the fireplace was unlit. And within that glow, a shape moved. Not smoke, not flame. A hand. Small, pale, pressing from the inside out. Fingers splayed against the grate as though testing the barrier between us. I stepped closer, breath fogging. The air around the hearth was ice cold. The hand withdrew. A whisper followed, quiet enough that I might have imagined it. Rule 3, Ethan, don't answer. The voice was my own. If that moment didn't make you look over your shoulder, you might be braver than I was that night. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second, hit subscribe to this channel, drop a like, and stay with me. Stories like this take time to tell, and your support keeps the lodge lights on for the next one. When the whisper faded, so did the light. I waited until the silence felt thick enough to breathe again, then wrote my first log entry, Day 1, 03:11 a.m. Unexplained sound from fireplace. Possible radio interference or wind resonance. No visible cause. Writing it down made it smaller, manageable, like labeling a specimen jar. That's something you learn in emergency work. Put a name on fear and it loses half its strength. But as I capped my pen, a detail hit me. I hadn't told anyone where the radio was, or that it was turned off. The hum in the walls deepened, low and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. I told myself it was just the generator, but the generator sat 50 feet away in a concrete shed. The sound was inside the building. I decided to check the main hall again. The temperature had dropped 5 degrees in under 10 minutes. My breath came out in clouds. Every step echoed longer than it should have, like the room was stretching behind me. Near the front doors, something glinted on the floor, wet footprints, bare, leading from the threshold toward the stairs. They ended at the first landing. I followed them halfway before they simply stopped, as though whoever left them had vanished mid-step. That was when the radio came alive again. Full volume this time. Ethan Cole, report to the basement. Dr. Lang's voice, except Maggie had locked the basement door hours ago and Lang was sleeping in a guest cabin a quarter-mile away. I stared at the radio, heart pounding, and for a split second I thought about answering. Then I remembered Rule 3, don't acknowledge the voices, so I switched the radio off. Outside, through the window, the forest swayed under the storm, and between the trees, lit only by the security lamps, stood a tall figure in a dark coat, motionless, half-turned toward the lodge. The same silhouette I'd seen on the road. When the lightning flashed, it was gone again. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the snow had stopped, but the world outside the lodge looked like it had been erased and rewritten in white. The silence was so complete it felt unnatural. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. I brewed another pot of coffee and waited for someone, anyone, to appear. Around 8:00 a.m., I heard the crunch of boots on snow. Maggie Hale emerged from the blinding sunlight, carrying a basket of groceries like she was returning from a cheerful farmer's market instead of the middle of nowhere. "Morning, Mr. Cole," she said briskly, stomping snow from her boots. "How'd your first night go?" I almost told her everything, the voice, the footprints, the silhouette in the storm, but the words jammed in my throat. I didn't want to sound like another burned-out drifter losing his mind on day one. "Quiet," I lied, "just settling in." Her eyes flicked to the fireplace behind me. For half a second, I thought I saw something like fear cross her face. Then she smiled. "That's good to hear. The first night can play tricks on people. Altitude, isolation, and a tired mind. That combination makes the imagination vivid." She said it with the calm precision of someone quoting from a script. Dr. Lang joined us 15 minutes later, moving with mechanical efficiency, crisp shirt already tucked into pressed trousers. "Excellent, you're up," he said, glancing at the logbook. "Any anomalies to report?" I hesitated. "Nothing out of the ordinary." Lang nodded. "Good. We value routine here. Consistency prevents unnecessary complications." He took the logbook, scanning it quickly. His fingers paused at my entry about the fireplace. "Wind resonance," he murmured. "That happens sometimes." He didn't look convinced, and for reasons I couldn't explain, that unsettled me more than if he'd laughed. After breakfast, Maggie gave me a list of chores. Check fuel levels in the generator, restock emergency supplies, inspect the perimeter for snow damage. It sounded mundane enough, but as I stepped outside, the cold struck me like a slap. The world was dazzling, the snow reflecting the sunlight so hard it hurt my eyes. The lodge loomed behind me, a monolith of dark wood against endless white, beautiful and wrong at the same time. The generator shed sat behind the building. The door was half buried in snow, and when I pried it open, warm air poured out, far too warm. Inside, the generator hummed smoothly, gauges steady, but the air smelled faintly of ozone and something metallic like overheated wiring or blood on steel. I checked the panel. Everything looked fine. Still, that smell lingered. I made a note in my log, trying to ignore the unease coiling in my gut. By midday, I'd completed the rounds and found myself staring out at the forest again. The sun glittered off the snow, blinding and pure. And then movement, a flicker at the tree line. A person. No, not a person. Too tall, too thin. The silhouette didn't move like a hiker or ranger. It simply swayed as though breathing with the wind. When I blinked, it was gone. I took a deep breath, turned away, and nearly collided with Dr. Lang. He stood right behind me, soundless as a shadow. "You'll find the woods full of illusions at this altitude," he said softly. "Reflections of light, pareidolia. Don't let them bother you." He had that look again, the calm, detached smile of someone who already knew what I'd seen. That night, the rules started to make sense. At dusk, I closed the lodge's massive front doors and slid the deadbolts into place. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. I pulled the heavy curtains across every window, covered the mirrors in the hallway, and logged the time. Sunset lockdown complete. 5:13 p.m. Maggie was in the kitchen when I checked in. The radio on the counter played old jazz, faint and crackly. "Dinner's ready," she said, ladling stew into bowls. The smell was rich and comforting, almost enough to make me forget where I was. "You seem nervous," she added, handing me a bowl. "Just tired." She studied me. "You didn't sleep much last night." I froze. "How would you know that?" She stirred her stew slowly. "Sound carries in these old halls. You'll get used to it." When she left, I noticed something strange on the refrigerator, a photo held by a magnet. It showed a man standing outside the lodge smiling beside a snowmobile. In black marker, someone had written on the border, "Harold, December 2021. The name tugged at something. "Previous caretaker," I murmured. Maggie's voice drifted from the hallway. "He didn't last long." The way she said it was casual, but the air around me felt heavier. By midnight, the wind had picked up. I sat in the monitoring office, watching the camera feeds. Static flickered across a few screens, probably interference from the storm. I toggled the controls, switching angles. Front porch, generator shed, main hall, east corridor. Everything looked normal until I reached the south-facing camera. The feed was grainy, snow washing out most of the image, but something was moving near the tree line again, something dark. I leaned closer. The figure stepped forward just far enough that the lights caught its face. It was the man from the photograph on the fridge. "Harold," I whispered. He was smiling directly into the camera, snow dusting his shoulders like ash. I blinked. The feed glitched. When the image cleared, he was gone. The hum in the walls deepened again, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I forced myself to breathe, to write it down. Possible reflection on lens. Investigate after sunrise. The radio hissed softly, then a voice, calm, clinical, familiar. "Mr. Cole, this is Dr. Lang. Please proceed to the basement immediately." I froze. The words were identical to the message from the night before. "You're testing me," I whispered. "Repeat." The voice said, same cadence, same pause. "Please proceed to the basement immediately." I turned off the radio. Moments later, someone knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced. I stared at it. The clock read 12:47 a.m. No one should have been outside. Maggie's quarters were in the west wing, and Dr. Lang slept in a cabin down the hill. Another knock, louder. I stepped closer, pulse hammering. "Who's there?" No answer. The third knock shook the door on its hinges. Then silence. My breath came in foggy bursts. I remembered Rule 3, do not acknowledge voices outside the lodge. But technically, a knock wasn't a voice, was it? I reached for the handle. The whisper came from behind me this time, low, steady, close to my ear. "Don't!" I spun around. The hallway was empty. That's when the lights flickered and went out. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moaning through the chimney. Then somewhere deep within the lodge, something started to move. Slow, deliberate steps dragging along the floorboards. They stopped right outside the monitoring room. I didn't breathe, didn't dare. A faint scraping sound followed, like fingernails on wood. Then the voice returned, soft and coaxing. "Ethan, it's freezing out here. Let me in." It was Maggie's voice. I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it at the door. The knob turned slightly, then stopped. "I left my key inside," she said sweetly. "Open up." My heart pounded so hard I thought the beam would shake. "Maggie?" I whispered. Silence. Then softly, "Please." The way she said it, calm, precise, with that same professional tone, was exactly how she spoke earlier that day. But there was something under it now, something hollow, as if the words were being repeated by a mouth that didn't quite understand them. I backed away from the door. Rule 3, do not acknowledge. I sat in the dark for hours, gripping the flashlight until my fingers ached. When the power finally came back at dawn, the first thing I saw was the front door, still locked, undisturbed, and on the floor, faint and melting, were wet footprints, bare, leading away from the door toward the stairs. When Maggie appeared at breakfast, she looked exactly the same. Hair neat, calm smile, no sign of being outside all night. "How'd you sleep?" she asked. I stared at her hands. They were bone dry. I didn't answer Maggie's question. Instead, I watched her pour coffee, move gracefully through the kitchen, and hum softly to herself. It was an old tune, one of those forgotten lullabies people hum without realizing it. Every note made my skin crawl. After the night I'd had, it was hard to believe she could act so normal. Too normal. When she set my mug down, I noticed her hand trembled, just once, and a few drops of coffee hit the table. She covered the slip instantly with that calm smile of hers. "I'll be in the pantry if you need anything," she said. Then she was gone, footsteps fading into the hall. I sat there staring at the steam rising from my mug, trying to convince myself the footprints I'd seen weren't hers, that maybe the power outage had caused condensation, or maybe I'd imagined them all together. But that wasn't true. The prints were real. And so was the voice outside my door. I needed answers. After breakfast, I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the maintenance corridor. The lodge was quiet, too quiet. I could hear my boots echo with every step. The hallways were lined with portraits of people who looked like they belonged to another century. Men in wool suits, women with lace collars, all staring straight ahead. None of them smiled. Halfway down the east wing, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before. It was narrow, painted the same color as the wall, almost invisible. A brass plate read "Storage." The handle was cold, but not locked. Inside was a cramped passage leading to a flight of stairs descending into darkness. My flashlight beam caught the first few steps. The air down there smelled old, dust, metal, and something faintly antiseptic, like a hospital that had been abandoned in a hurry. "Basement access prohibited," I muttered, remembering Rule 4. But the message from the night before echoed in my head. "Ethan Cole, report to the basement. Curiosity can feel like hunger. It gnaws at reason until you give in." I started down. Each step creaked softly, and the hum that had haunted the walls above was louder here, pulsing through the floor like a heartbeat. At the bottom of the stairs, my light swept across shelves lined with old maintenance tools, rusted pipes, and boxes marked with faded company logos. Then I saw the metal door. It didn't belong here. Industrial-grade steel, reinforced bolts, a keypad beside the handle. Someone had tried to disguise it by hanging a tarp over it, but the edge was frayed, revealing a warning label beneath. "Authorized personnel only. Property of Orion Research Group." I traced the edge of the door, cold, smooth, humming faintly, with hidden power. Something shifted behind it, a sound like a slow exhale. I stepped back quickly, heart pounding. "Mice," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. Footsteps sounded above, measured, deliberate. I turned off my flashlight and froze. A shadow moved across the thin light spilling from the stairwell. Then a voice. "Mr. Cole, what are you doing down there?" Dr. Lang. His tone was calm, but there was steel underneath. I climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight in one hand, my mind racing for an excuse. "Just checking for water damage," I said. "Heard something odd last night. Thought it might be the pipes." He studied me in silence. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and in the dim light they caught reflections like glass. "You're not authorized to enter that area," he said finally. "The basement contains sensitive equipment. Any interference could be dangerous." "What kind of equipment?" I asked. Lang smiled slightly. "Nothing you need to worry about. Focus on your duties. Leave the rest to us." He gestured for me to go ahead of him. I walked up the remaining steps, my pulse hammering. When we reached the hall, he paused and added quietly, "Curiosity is useful in moderation, Mr. Cole, but too much of it can be harmful." It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. That afternoon, I drove into Estes Park to refuel the generator cans and pick up supplies. The town was small, frozen storefronts, a diner, a post office that doubled as a grocery store. It should have felt normal, but the moment I mentioned Aspen Ridge Lodge, every conversation stopped. The cashier, a young woman with blonde braids, froze mid-scan. "You work up there?" she asked. "Yeah, just started this week." Her eyes darted to the old man sweeping near the door. "You should be careful," she whispered. "We get people through here every winter. Most of them don't last long." "Because of the isolation?" She didn't answer. The old man set down his broom. "Tell your boss," he said, voice gravelly and low, "that folks around here don't want any trouble this season." "What kind of trouble?" He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You'll find out." When I stepped outside, the cold felt sharper, like the air itself had teeth. I loaded the supplies into the truck and caught my reflection in the side mirror, pale, tense, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing behind me in the reflection, but when I turned, there was only snow and empty street. I drove back faster than I should have. By the time I reached the lodge, twilight had settled like smoke across the valley. The building looked different in that light, less like shelter, more like something pretending to be one. Maggie met me at the door, her expression unreadable. "Town treat you well?" she asked. "Friendly enough?" She nodded. "Good. Not everyone up here likes outsiders." There was a faint tremor in her voice, the first real emotion I'd heard from her. "You didn't tell anyone about the lodge's operations, did you?" "What operations?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed, then she gave a small, practiced laugh. "Of course, just making sure." That night, I locked the doors exactly at sunset. The routine gave me comfort, simple actions that made sense in a place where little else did. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, fireplace off. But when I returned to the monitoring station, one of the screens was already active. South camera feed, the same view of the tree line. I hadn't turned it on. The timestamp in the corner read 3:12 a.m. On the screen, a man was walking through the snow toward the lodge. His movements slow and deliberate. The image was grainy, distorted by the falling flakes, but I recognized the shape of his coat, the same one I'd seen on the road when my truck spun out. The figure stopped just outside the porch light, face obscured by shadow. Then the feed cut to static. A sharp, metallic crack echoed through the building like a door slamming somewhere deep below. I grabbed my flashlight and ran for the hall. The main doors were locked, windows sealed. Yet the sound came again, from the east wing this time, beneath the floor. The basement. I forced myself to stop. Every instinct screamed to check it out, to do something. But Rule 4 hovered in my mind like a silent threat. Instead, I wrote another note in the logbook. Unexplained sounds from below. No visual confirmation. Then, against every rational impulse, I listened. Faint through the hum and wind, a voice drifted up from the vents. It wasn't my name this time. It was laughter, soft, slow, human. I closed the logbook and turned up the radio, drowning it out with static. But long after the sound faded, I could still feel it vibrating through the floorboards. At dawn, I checked the basement door again. The keypad light was blinking red now. Someone had entered the wrong code overnight, or someone had tried to open it. As I turned away, I noticed fresh scratches on the floorboards leading away from the door. Deep gouges in the wood, almost like claw marks. That was when I stopped pretending any of this was normal. But the day passed in a haze. Maggie was gone, supposedly on a supply run. Lang stayed in his office, typing endlessly on his laptop. I spent hours wandering the halls, listening for that hum, tracing it to its source. By afternoon, I'd found a hidden panel in the wall near the main staircase, a vent cover slightly ajar. When I pried it open, warm air rushed out, carrying the faint smell of chemicals. Behind the vent, cables ran down into the floor, glowing faintly blue. There was a label on one of the wires, ORG, Neural Monitoring Unit. I stared at it, trying to process what that meant. Neural monitoring, like brain activity tracking. Why would a remote lodge need something like that? I followed the line of the cables along the wall until it vanished behind the stone fireplace, the same fireplace where that hand had pressed against the grate 2 nights ago. I backed away slowly, fighting the urge to smash the equipment, to tear out every cable in the building. But the logical part of me, the paramedic who had learned to keep calm when everything else burned, told me to wait, to observe, to gather proof. That night, I would watch the cameras again. Only this time, I wouldn't turn away. I barely ate dinner that night. The stew Maggie had left simmering on the stove filled the air with a heavy sweetness that turned my stomach. She'd gone to bed early again, at least that's what she said, and Dr. Lang had locked himself in his office before dusk. I was alone in the main hall, the fire crackling weakly, the rest of the lodge steeped in shadow. It was 10:48 p.m. when I decided to test the cameras. I checked every connection, rebooted the main console, and switched the recording system to manual override. The south camera, the one that had caught the figure earlier, flickered, then stabilized. For a moment I saw only snow drifting like dust in the light. Then something moved at the edge of the screen. It wasn't human this time, not exactly. A pale shimmer, like heat distortion, rippled between the trees. It advanced, slow and sinuous, leaving no footprints. The air around it seemed to bend, warping the image. Then, just as the shimmer reached the boundary of the floodlight, it stopped and turned. For one impossible second, the shape had a face. My own. I recoiled so fast, the chair slammed into the wall. The monitors blinked, lines of static racing across the screens. When the feed returned, the snow was empty again. I forced myself to breathe. Hallucination, I thought, altitude, exhaustion. But deep down, I knew better. Something was watching me, and it wanted me to see it. The storm outside thickened as the night wore on. The wind screamed around the eaves like an animal in pain. I made another round of the building, checking doors, windows, locks. Everything held. Yet the deeper I went into the corridors, the more I sensed a pulse beneath my feet, like the heartbeat of something vast buried below. When I reached the fireplace, the pulse was strongest. The stone radiated a faint warmth, even though the fire had burned out hours ago. I crouched and brushed my hand across the hearth. The surface vibrated under my palm. That's when I saw the faintest line of light leaking from between the stones. It wasn't firelight, it was blue, cold and steady, like the glow of the cables behind the vent. I pressed my ear against the masonry. Beneath the hum, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of machinery, a steady mechanical rhythm deeper than any generator. Whatever the neural monitoring unit was, it was under this fireplace. I went back to the office and waited. At exactly midnight, footsteps echoed in the west hall. Slow, deliberate, measured. "Dr. Lang?" I called. No answer. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Then, silence. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but something caught my eye, a faint reflection in the glass of a framed photograph. I turned toward it. For a split second, I saw a figure standing behind me in the reflection, tall and motionless. Its face was just a blur of light. I spun around. Nothing there. The glass cracked with a sharp ping, splintering across the frame. The hum in the walls rose to a low drone that made my teeth ache. Every light in the corridor flickered one by one until I was standing in strobe-like flashes of white and dark. Then the fire alarm began to wail. I ran to the main hall. Smoke rolled out from the kitchen, thick and acrid. I burst through the swinging doors. and stopped. The stovetop burners were off. No fire, no heat. The smoke was pouring from the vents above the refrigerator, curling like black fog, and in the middle of it stood Dr. Lang. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't even coughing. He was just watching the smoke rise, hands folded neatly behind his back. "What the hell is happening?" I demanded. He didn't turn. "A systems test," he said. "Routine calibration." "Routine? The alarm's blaring and the vents are—" He faced me suddenly, eyes gleaming in the pulsing red light of the alarm. "Do you know why we hired you, Mr. Cole?" The question caught me off guard. "Because you needed a caretaker. Because you were broken," he said. "You lost control once. You needed structure, rules. This place offers both." My throat went dry. "You've been watching me." He smiled thinly. "Observing, yes. It's what we do here. Fear is a fragile thing, Ethan. It blooms in isolation. You're ideal for our study." My stomach twisted. "What study?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "You've seen the cables. You've felt the hum. This lodge was built on the remains of an old government facility. Project Orion. We're continuing that work, mapping the human mind under stress, teaching it to adapt." "Adapt?" I repeated. "To what?" He tilted his head. "To itself." The alarm cut off. The silence afterward was deafening. Lang's expression softened almost kindly. "Go get some rest, Mr. Cole. You'll feel better in the morning." I didn't move. "What's behind that basement door?" He regarded me for a long moment, then said, "The future." Then he walked away, his footsteps vanishing into the quiet. I barely made it back to my room. My head pounded. Every nerve felt wired, tuned too tight. I sat on the bed and opened my notebook, forcing myself to write everything down before I could lose my nerve. They're watching me. The lodge is wired with sensors. Something under the floor, machines, maybe biological. Lang knows more. Maggie's part of it. Need proof. When I looked up, the window was fogged over. I wiped it with my sleeve. Outside, the snow reflected the dim light of the porch lamp, and in that pale glow I saw movement again. Someone was standing in the yard, half turned toward the lodge. The same silhouette from before. But this time I noticed something new. The figure's shadow stretched toward the building, longer than it should have been, twisting across the snow like a living thing. And then, slowly, it raised its arm and pointed directly at my window. The lights in my room died. For a heartbeat, I saw my reflection in the glass, my face white with terror, and behind it, just faintly, another face overlapping mine, smiling. I stumbled backward, knocking the chair over. The radio on my nightstand clicked on by itself, hissing static. Then came the voice, calm, gentle. "Don't fight it, Ethan. It's already begun." The static deepened into a low hum that filled the room. The same vibration I'd heard in the walls, now pulsing through the floor, through my bones. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, like gravity had thickened around me. My vision blurred. Through the fog, I heard another sound, a whisper that wasn't from the radio. "Rule 5, it said. "Report all anomalies before dawn." My knees buckled. I hit the floor hard, the world spinning. Then, as suddenly as it started, the hum stopped. The lights flicked back on. The room was empty, the radio silent. When I looked outside again, the figure was gone. Only a single set of footprints remained in the snow, leading from the tree line straight to my window, and stopping there. I wrote one last line in my log before the pen slipped from my fingers. Something here knows my name, and it wants me to remember it. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. The hum never returned, but I could feel it in my chest, an echo that wouldn't fade. By sunrise, I'd made a decision. If Dr. Lang wouldn't tell me what was happening, I'd find out myself. The answers were in the basement, behind that steel door, inside whatever machine was buried beneath the lodge. The next night, I'd get the code. Whatever this place was, whatever it was doing to me, I wasn't going to be its experiment, not anymore. The morning after the voice spoke through my radio, the world felt sharper, like someone had turned the focus knob on reality too far. Every sound, the drip of melting snow, the creak of the wood beams, even the hum of the lights, pressed too hard against my nerves. Maggie was already in the kitchen when I came down. She looked as composed as ever, humming that same low tune under her breath while buttering toast. "Rough night?" she asked. I didn't bother lying this time. "I heard someone outside again." She paused, knife hovering over the bread. "You kept the doors locked?" "Of course." She nodded, then said quietly, "Sometimes the mountain plays tricks on people who don't belong here." "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning," she said, turning toward me, "you'll start to see and hear the things you fear most if you let this place get under your skin. That's why the rules exist. They're not about obedience. They're about survival." The look she gave me then was almost tender, as if she pitied me, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She slid the plate toward me. "Eat, Ethan. You'll need strength tonight." After breakfast, I decided to look for something solid, evidence that could prove I wasn't losing my mind. I started with the office. Lang's laptop was gone, his desk immaculate, but the file cabinet beneath it was unlocked. Inside were folders marked Facility Maintenance, Supply Chain, Behavioral Data. Behavioral data. My pulse jumped. I flipped one open. Inside were pages of typed reports, heart rates, cortisol levels, reaction times. Some pages had my name on them. Subject C17, sleep duration 2.3 hours. Resting pulse elevated, cognitive pattern stable. Recommendation, increase auditory stimulus at 02:45 a.m. to monitor stress resilience. I flipped to another. Subject C16, non-compliant. Removed from program following incident number 12. The name was blacked out, but at the top corner, faintly visible under the marker, I could make out the first letter, H. Harold. I stuffed the file into my jacket and left the office, adrenaline burning through the fog of exhaustion. The rules, the hum, the system tests, they weren't protecting me. They were provoking me, studying me. The next time Lang came around, I'd confront him with proof. But first, I needed to find the code to that basement door. The keypad by the basement had a thin layer of frost around the buttons, like someone had touched it with a cold hand. I crouched and wiped it clean, scanning the numbers. No scratches, no clues. I tried the obvious combinations, RO 1234, the date on the supply forms. Nothing. When I leaned closer, I noticed something etched faintly on the wall beside it. Not with a tool, scratched by fingernails. 6713. I pressed the sequence. The red light turned green. The bolt slid back with a low click. Behind the door, cold air breathed out like an open tomb. The basement stretched much deeper than I expected. Concrete walls, steel supports, humming pipes overhead. The blue light pulsed faintly from cables running along the ceiling. The air tasted metallic. Halfway down the corridor, I saw another door, smaller, older, with a placard that read, Observation Chamber 1. The handle turned easily. Inside was a small room with a single glass window, facing what looked like a containment cell. The cell's walls were padded. A metal chair sat in the center, restraints dangling from its arms. On the wall above the observation window, a speaker hissed softly, then faintly, Repeat exposure sequence in 5, 4, 3. I froze. The voice wasn't live. It was a recording. But still, the sound filled the room, like the echo of something that had once been real. A projector in the corner flickered to life, casting shaky black and white footage onto the wall. The timestamp read, 2022. Harold sat in the chair, eyes wild, mouth moving soundlessly. Electrodes covered his temples. Dr. Lang stood behind the glass, calm, clipboard in hand. The footage cut to static, then a final frame. Harold looking directly into the camera. Lips forming words that even without sound I could read clearly. Don't listen to them. The screen went black. A faint creak sounded behind me. I turned and froze. Maggie stood in the doorway, face pale as the light. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but fear. "Tell me what this is," I said. "What are you people doing?" She looked past me at the chair, then back at me. "It started as research, sensory endurance studies. The company wanted to understand how isolation affects the mind. But Lang took it further. He believes fear can evolve people, reshape the brain, make it receptive." "Receptive to what?" She hesitated. "To what's under the lodge." The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor, a low, resonant thrum that made the air feel thick. Maggie's eyes widened. "He's activated it," she whispered. "You need to leave. Now." She grabbed my arm, but before we reached the stairs, the lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, the hum became a roar, like something waking up. Then, faintly through the black, a voice, distorted, layered with static and breath. "Stay with us, Ethan." It wasn't Lang's voice. It wasn't human. The emergency lights flickered on, dim red strips cutting through the darkness. Maggie's grip on my arm was iron tight, her voice trembling now. "Don't move. It senses vibration." I froze. The hum had shifted, less mechanical now, more like breathing, rhythmic and alive. Through the red haze, the walls seemed to pulse, cables throbbing faintly as if carrying a heartbeat instead of current. "Maggie," I whispered, "what's it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned close and said, "Don't speak, just walk." We moved slowly up the corridor, boots silent on the concrete. Every instinct screamed to run, but the air itself felt like a warning. Then a new sound joined the hum, a dragging noise, metal scraping stone, coming from the far end of the hall. Maggie's hand tightened around mine. "Keep going," she hissed. But I turned my head just long enough to glimpse what followed us. A shape, vaguely human, crawling from a half-open maintenance hatch. Its limbs were too long, its skin glistening with some dark sheen. The red light slid over its body like oil. We reached the stairs just as it let out a sound that wasn't a growl, wasn't a word. Something in between, something shaped like Ethan. Maggie shoved me upward. "Go!" The keypad light blinked green when she slammed the door behind us. The hum stopped instantly. Silence roared in its place. She leaned against the door, breathing hard. "You were never supposed to open that. It's awake now." "What is?" "The result of Lang's experiments. The human mind pushed past fear until it becomes something else. We used to call them subjects. Now they're just echoes." Her eyes met mine. "And if we stay here tonight, one of them will reach the surface." We barricaded the basement door with a heavy bench from the hallway. Maggie's calm had fractured. She moved with jittery precision, checking locks, drawing curtains. "Lang knows what's happening," she muttered. "He always does, but he won't stop it. He wants to see how you'll react." I followed her into the main room. "Me? Why?" "You were chosen for your profile. Trauma tolerance, emergency training, no family nearby. You're ideal for observation." "I'm not your experiment." She looked up, eyes sharp. "That's what the last one said." The words hit like ice. "Harold," she flinched. "You saw the footage." "I saw him warn me." She nodded slowly. "Then you know what happens to people who break the rules." Before I could answer, the radio on the wall crackled to life. Lang's voice, smooth, calm, unhurried. Maggie, Mr. Cole, I see you've taken initiative. I admire that. The lower containment system is active now. Whatever you released is not dangerous as long as we maintain observation. Observation? I shouted. There's something alive down there. A pause. Then, precisely. The line went dead. Maggie sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. He'll lock us in to study containment response. I went to the window. Snow lashed sideways in the wind. The storm hadn't let up since morning. There was no getting out through the main road. I'm going for help, I said. There's a ranger station 10 miles west. You'll freeze before you get there. Then I'll freeze trying. You coming? For a long moment she didn't move. Then she stood, grabbed her coat. You'll need the snowmobile. The machine was stored in a shed behind the lodge, half buried under drifts. The night outside was so white it glowed, but the woods beyond the floodlights were pitch black, thick with snow and something else. Movement faint, deliberate. Maggie handed me the keys. Stay on the trail. Don't look at the trees. If you hear anything that sounds like your own voice, keep driving. What about you? I'll hold the door as long as I can. Maggie, go! She pushed the shed door open, and the cold punched through me like a wall. I swung onto the snowmobile and kicked it to life. The engine roared, shattering the quiet. For a moment the noise drowned out the hum beneath the ground. Then I saw something move at the edge of the tree line. A flash of pale skin, a glint of eyes reflecting the floodlight like a cat's. I gunned the throttle and shot down the trail. The forest closed in fast, the snow whipping past like shrapnel. My headlamp cut a narrow tunnel of light through the dark. Every few seconds, I caught glimpses of shadows darting between the trees. Too fast, too fluid. I kept my eyes forward. Maggie's words echoed in my mind. Don't look at the trees. 5 minutes into the ride, the engine began to sputter. The fuel gauge dropped even though the tank had been full. I cursed, slammed the throttle. The machine coughed twice, then died. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind had stopped. I pulled my flashlight from my pocket and swept the beam across the clearing. Snow, pines, silence. Then a voice from behind me. Engine trouble? I spun around, light flashing over a figure in a ranger's parka, goggles and scarf, pulled high over her face. She held a rifle slung over one shoulder. Jesus, I said, lowering the flashlight. You scared the hell out of me. Name's Lena Ortiz, she said. You're from the lodge? Yeah, Ethan Cole. I need to get to the ranger station. There's been an incident. Her gaze sharpened. You opened the basement, didn't you? I blinked. How do you... I've been monitoring signals from that place for weeks. The moment you breached containment, half my equipment spiked. You need to come with me now. She stepped closer, motioning for me to follow. You're lucky I found you before they did. They? She turned her head toward the trees. You don't want to know. We reached her outpost, a small cabin buried under snowdrifts. 15 minutes later, inside, the warmth hit like a drug. Radios, computers, and portable generators cluttered the space. Screens flickered with static and data streams. Lena tossed her gloves aside and studied one of the monitors. You triggered something in the Orion system, she said. The whole valley's emitting electromagnetic noise. Whatever Lang's been hiding, it's not just psychological. I handed her the file I'd taken from his office. Behavioral data. They're using us as subjects. She flipped through the pages, jaw tightening. Not just you. There are dozens of profiles here, some from years back. What's under the lodge? I asked. She hesitated, then said, If I told you, you'd think I was crazy. Try me. 15 years ago, the government built a lab beneath Aspen Ridge. They were studying sensory manipulation, ways to project information directly into the human brain. Orion bought the property after the program shut down. Lang's been trying to recreate the technology using volunteers. Volunteers like Maggie, Harold? Volunteers at first. But fear changes people, Ethan. It rewires them. Some didn't survive. The ones who did stopped being human long before the lab went dark. She turned one of the monitors toward me. On the screen, a grainy infrared image showed the lodge. Heat signatures pulsing beneath it, moving like veins. One of the signals broke away, heading straight toward our coordinates. Lena's eyes met mine. You led it here. We killed the lights and barricaded the door. Outside, the wind screamed again, but beneath it came the faint crunch of footsteps on snow. I peeked through the window. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, head tilted, motionless. It was Maggie. Her parka hung open, hair plastered to her face with frost. She made it out, I whispered. No, Lena said, raising her rifle. Look closer. Maggie smiled, or tried to. The skin around her mouth stretched too far. Her eyes glowed faintly blue. She's one of them now, Lena said. Maggie took a step forward, then another, moving with that same unnatural grace I'd seen in the basement. Her voice drifted through the glass, soft, pleading. Ethan, open the door. It's so cold. I shook my head. That's not her. Then don't listen, Lena said. But the voice changed, softened, became something else. My mother's voice, whispering from the other side of the door. Mijo, please let me in. My breath caught. Lena grabbed my shoulder hard. It's using your memories. You have to fight it. Outside, Maggie, or whatever wore her face, pressed a hand against the window. The skin shimmered, flickered, and for a split second, I saw what lay beneath. A lattice of wires and muscle fibers pulsing blue. Then she spoke again, and this time, her voice was pure static. Rule 2, Ethan. Don't respond to the knocking. The glass cracked. Lena fired once, the rifle's report deafening in the small cabin. The figure exploded into a cloud of light and vanished into the storm. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Finally, Lena lowered the rifle. Now, do you believe me? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I believe you. Good, she said, checking her ammo. Because that was just one. There are more. By dawn, the storm had eased. The valley lay silent under a bruised sky. We loaded gear into a truck hidden behind the cabin. Lena tossed me a thermal coat and a pistol. We're going back, she said. If we shut down the system under the lodge, the others will stop moving. You think it's that simple? It never is, she said, but it's a start. As the truck engine growled to life, I looked back toward the ridge. The lodge stood there in the distance, smoke curling from its chimneys like breath from a sleeping giant. The rules Maggie had given me ran through my head again. Keep doors locked. Don't respond to voices. Don't enter restricted areas. Now I understood. They weren't warnings to protect us. They were instructions to protect whatever was inside, and I had already broken every one of them. The drive back to the lodge was silent except for the crunch of tires over ice. The truck's headlights carved tunnels of light through the fog. I watched the outlines of trees slip past, their branches bending under the weight of snow. It felt like driving through the ribs of some enormous sleeping creature. Lena kept her hands steady on the wheel. Once we reach the ridge, we'll park half a mile out. I don't want to announce we're back. Lang will know anyway, I said. He seems to know everything that happens there. She glanced sideways at me. He knows what his sensors tell him. Let's give him more than he can handle. The words hit a raw nerve. Sensors, that hum in the walls. The cables under the fireplace. It wasn't just some data link. It was part of something that could think, or at least learn. I remembered the whisper that had mimicked my voice, the radio that spoke without power. Lena broke the silence again. You said Maggie mentioned something under the lodge? She called it a result, whatever that means. She wasn't wrong. My equipment caught seismic fluctuations under the property right after you entered the basement. Like something big moved down there. Not an earthquake, more like a pulse. I turned toward her. And we're going back? She gave a dry smile. Welcome to Colorado Public Service. We abandoned the truck where the trail disappeared into deeper snow. The wind had died, but the air was brittle cold. The lodge loomed ahead, dark against the sky, the windows faintly glowing with blue light. That glow wasn't there before, I whispered. It's coming from the lab level, Lena said. Whatever Lang turned on is running at full output. We crossed the yard quickly, keeping low. The front doors were still locked, frost crusting the handles. I led her around to the generator shed. Inside, the machines throbbed with power, louder than ever. I followed the cables with my flashlight until I found a new junction box mounted on the wall. It wasn't there before. The label read Orion Neural Core, active. A small monitor blinked beside it, showing waveforms that moved like heartbeats. Lena leaned in. That's a neural pattern, she said. It's not mechanical, it's biological. I stared at the lines. They spiked once, as if in response to her voice. Can it hear us? I asked. She didn't answer. We left the shed and slipped into the lodge through a side door near the kitchen. The smell hit me first, ozone, and something faintly sweet like burned sugar. The power was unstable. Lights flickered in slow, rhythmic pulses. Shadows stretched and recoiled with every flicker, as if the building itself was breathing. Stay close, Lena murmured. The main hall was empty. The fireplace glowed faintly blue around the seams. I crouched, brushed my hand across the stone, and felt it vibrating, steady, alive. A low murmur filled the air, half mechanical, half whispering speech. Lena raised her flashlight toward the second-floor balcony. Lang, she called, you need to shut this down. A door opened above. Dr. Lang stepped into view, calm as ever, a pistol in his hand. Ranger Ortiz, he said. I wondered when you'd appear. You're endangering everyone in this valley, she said. That system wasn't meant to run at this scale. He descended the stairs with deliberate grace. You don't understand, Lena. The human mind resists evolution. Fear is the key to breaking that resistance. I stepped between them. You call this evolution? You turned people into monsters. He looked at me with something like pity. They aren't monsters, Mr. Cole. They're transitions, the next phase of human consciousness, freed from the constraints of the body. Harold didn't look very free, I snapped. Lang's expression hardened. Harold failed the integration. You may not. Lena raised her rifle. Back away from him. Lang smiled faintly. You think bullets can stop an idea? Before she could reply, the lights went out again. A wave of sound rolled through the floor, low, seismic, and very close. The fireplace flared blue and the hum became a roar. Lang's voice rose over it. It's awake! The floor beneath us shuddered. The stones of the hearth cracked open, spilling dust and light. From the widening gap came a rush of cold air that smelled like iron and decay. Lena grabbed my arm. Move! We ran toward the back corridor as the floor split wider behind us. Something massive moved beneath the tiles, a shadow of impossible size writhing just under the surface. Lang's voice followed, calm even as the room tore apart. Fear is just the beginning, Mr. Cole. Embrace it. A beam fell, blocking the hall. Lena dragged me through a service door into the kitchen. The sound of breaking stone echoed behind us. She slammed the door and braced against it, breathing hard. We can't fight that from up here. We have to cut the power at the source. The generator? She shook her head. No, the core. Downstairs. That's where it's feeding from. The basement, of course. We reached the door again, still damaged. Keypad lights blinking erratically. I punched in the code. The green light flashed weakly. As we descended, the air grew warmer, heavy with static. The hum wasn't a sound anymore. It was a pressure, pressing into my skull like a second heartbeat. I could feel thoughts that weren't mine brushing the edges of my mind. The corridor lights flickered on, one by one. The containment cell door ahead was open. Inside, the chair was gone. Lena moved past me, scanning with her flashlight. "Left tunnel," she said. "That leads to the main lab." The tunnel walls shimmered faintly, wet with condensation. Pipes and cables ran along the ceiling, pulsing blue. Every few yards we passed what looked like pods embedded in the walls, opaque glass shapes moving inside. Some human, some not quite. One of them stirred as we passed. A hand pressed weakly against the glass. Its skin was translucent, veins glowing like circuits. "God," Lena whispered, "they're still alive." I wanted to turn back, to run, but the hum behind us grew louder, urging us forward. We reached a final steel door, half open. Beyond it, a vast chamber spread out beneath the lodge. Rows of machines surrounding a single cylindrical tank filled with swirling blue fluid. Inside the tank floated something enormous and vaguely human, its limbs tethered by cables, its head wired to the walls. "That's the core," Lena said. Lang merged the neural data into a biological host. The thing inside the tank opened its eyes. They were white, featureless, but I felt it see me. And then, without warning, it spoke. Not aloud, but inside my head. "You were chosen, Ethan." I staggered back. "Lena, it's in my head." She aimed her rifle at the tank. "We shut it down now." But before she could fire, Lang's voice echoed through the intercom. "You'll kill hundreds of linked subjects if you destroy it. Their consciousness depends on the network." "Then free them," Lena shouted. "I can't," he said softly. "They are the network." The fluid in the tank began to boil. The hum turned to a scream that wasn't sound but sensation, cold fire crawling under my skin. The room lights strobed violently. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. Images flooded my mind. Harold in the chair. Maggie at the door. My own face reflected in 1,000 mirrors, each whispering the same word. "Join." Lena fired. The shot cracked through the chamber. The glass shattered, blue liquid gushing out like a tidal wave. The thing inside convulsed, cables snapping loose, its scream filling the air in one final surge of light. Then, silence. The power died. The hum vanished. Lena hauled me to my feet. "Move, before this whole place comes down." We ran through the tunnel as alarms wailed. Steam and smoke burst from ruptured pipes. The walls buckled behind us, collapsing one by one. We reached the stairs just as the floor gave way. I stumbled, catching the railing. The sound below was like thunder, stone grinding against stone. We burst into the main hall. The fire was out, the blue light gone. Snow swirled through cracks in the windows. The lodge was dying. Outside, dawn was breaking, a faint, cold gray over the mountains. We stopped at the edge of the porch, both breathing hard. The silence felt strange, heavy but clean. "It's over," I said. Lena shook her head. "No, it's sleeping." I turned to her. "What do you mean?" She looked back at the lodge. "We cut the body's power, not the signal. Whatever that was, it's still transmitting." I followed her gaze. Faint lines of blue light still pulsed under the snow, radiating outward from the lodge in veins that reached toward the valley. "It's spreading," she whispered. When we finally made it back to the ranger station, the power was still out. Lena patched her radio into a portable receiver, scanning frequencies. The static cleared for a second, just long enough for a voice to come through. Not Lang, not Maggie, my own. "Ethan Cole, report to the basement." Lena looked at me, eyes wide. I switched the radio off. That night, as we huddled in the dark, I wrote one final note in my logbook. The rules were never meant to keep us safe. They were meant to keep it contained. Now it's free. If you're hearing this, stay away from Aspen Ridge. And if you ever find yourself alone at night and you hear someone calling your name, don't answer. 3 days after the explosion, the snow around Aspen Ridge was still black with soot. Helicopters circled the valley like carrion birds. Floodlights carved sterile paths through the wreckage. The news called it a gas line accident, but anyone who'd stood inside that building knew the truth. There had never been gas lines in the lodge. I woke up in a field hospital tent near Estes Park, a monitor beeping quietly beside me. My hands were wrapped in gauze, my throat raw from smoke. Lena was gone. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd never existed outside the lodge, that she'd been another projection from that humming brain beneath the floor. Then I heard her voice outside, arguing with someone in a tone too sharp to be imagined. "He's a witness, not a suspect," she was saying. "You have no jurisdiction here." A man answered, low and even. "We both know Orion facilities fall under federal authority. Step aside, Ranger Ortiz." Boots crunched on gravel. The tent flap lifted. 2 men in dark suits entered, badges flashing in the light. The older one, gray hair, immaculate posture, spoke first. "Mr. Cole, I'm Special Agent Keene. We'd like a word." I stared at the coffee stain on his tie instead of his eyes. "If you're here to tell me the mountain exploded, I already noticed." His partner, young, silent, eyes like polished steel, took out a recorder. "For our files," he said. Lena followed them in, jaw tight. "You don't have to talk to them," she muttered. "It's fine," I said. "Maybe they'll tell me what I saw." Keene folded his hands behind his back. "You claim Dr. Victor Lang operated an unlicensed research site under Aspen Ridge Lodge. You also claim he conducted experiments on human subjects, experiments involving neural synchronization. Do you have any physical evidence?" I nodded toward the jacket hanging on the chair. "Pocket folder marked behavioral data." The young agent flipped through the pages, scanning. "Half these reports are blank." "They weren't blank when I took them." Keene sighed. "Mr. Cole, trauma does strange things to memory. You were found unconscious 50 yards from a structural collapse. Carbon monoxide poisoning, mild hypothermia. I know what I saw," I cut in. "There was something alive under that lodge." He held my gaze for a long moment, then closed the folder. "We'll be in touch." Both men turned and left. No reassurance, no denial, just bureaucratic calm. Lena waited until their footsteps faded. "They'll bury this," she said. "They always do. Then we dig it up ourselves." 2 nights later, I was released from the hospital. The valley was closed, environmental hazard, according to the signs. But we both knew that was code for cover-up. Lena's Ranger truck waited by the gate. She tossed me a thermos of coffee as I climbed in. "They're shipping what's left of the lodge to a private facility near Denver," she said. "Orion's name doesn't appear on any manifest, but the trucks are theirs." "Lang?" "No body recovered. Keene says he was vaporized in the explosion." She glanced at me. "You don't believe that, do you?" I shook my head. "He's too neat to vanish without a reason." We drove in silence down the dark highway. The radio hissed faintly, picking up half-buried frequencies that rose and fell like breathing. Every few miles, the static would shape itself into a single word before fading again. "Ethan." Lena turned it off. We rented a cheap motel room outside Boulder and pinned everything we knew across the wall: maps, photos of the lodge, copies of Lang's papers. The pattern that emerged was worse than we expected. Orion had been quietly purchasing abandoned research sites for years, decommissioned radar stations, Cold War listening posts, even parts of old missile silos. Every location sat on fault lines of magnetic interference, places where the Earth's natural frequencies distorted radio waves. The perfect conditions for transmitting whatever signal Lang had created. Lena pointed to one red circle on the map. Here, Nevada. Another site went online the same night the lodge blew. You think it spread? She nodded. Not physically. The signal transmitted before we cut power. Whatever was inside the neural core, call it consciousness, call it code. It's not confined to matter anymore. I stared at the pins, the web of red string connecting them. Then we didn't kill it. No, she said softly. We woke it. That night I dreamed of snow. The lodge stood whole again, lights blazing in every window. Inside, the hallways hummed with that familiar vibration. I walked to the fireplace, and behind the grate, blue light glowed like the heart of a furnace. Maggie was there, standing beside it, untouched by the flames. You broke the cycle, she said, but cycles don't end, they widen. What do you want from me? I asked. Her smile was sad. To remember, that's all it ever wants. Memory keeps it alive. When I woke, the radio on the nightstand was whispering faintly. I leaned close. Through the static came a single sentence in Lang's voice. Rule 6, Ethan. Never dream with the lights off. The bulb above us flickered and died. At dawn, we hit the road again, heading south toward Nevada. The mountains faded behind us, gray silhouettes in the rearview mirror. For the first time in days, sunlight touched the snowfields, turning them gold. For a moment, I almost believed it was over, that we were just two survivors chasing ghosts across the desert. But as the highway curved west, I caught the faint shimmer of blue veins running beneath the ice, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Whatever slept beneath Aspen Ridge hadn't died. It had learned to move. The desert air carried a heat that didn't belong in winter. Even before we crossed the Nevada state line, the snow gave way to red earth and brittle sage. The wind hissed through the cracked highway guardrails like breath through teeth. Lena drove with both hands on the wheel, her eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. She hadn't spoken in over an hour. The silence was heavy, filled with the low hum of the tires and the faint ringing that had started in my ears the closer we got to the coordinates she'd found. Still hearing it? She asked finally. It's not just sound, I said. It's like pressure, a pulse behind my eyes. That means we're close. She handed me a folder, government maps, satellite photos, purchase records scrubbed of names. The property sat at the edge of a dry lakebed called Raven's Hollow, once a weather monitoring station, now officially abandoned. The pattern of cables beneath the soil looked eerily like the blue veins under Aspen Ridge. By dusk, the desert turned the color of rust. We left the highway and bounced down a dirt road until the observatory appeared. A dome of scorched metal crouched against the sky. Every few seconds, the dome glinted, not from sunlight but from an inner flicker, a pulse that matched the rhythm in my head. Lena cut the engine. That's it. The wind died. The hum grew louder. Inside, the air was stale and hot. Sand drifted across the floor in thin sheets. The control panels were coated in dust except for one, its screens alive with scrolling blue code. That's not power from the grid, Lena said. It's self-sustaining. The code shifted, lines rearranging themselves until words appeared. Welcome back, Ethan. My stomach dropped. It knows me. She moved closer, typing quickly. It's using the same neural architecture Lang built. It must have copied part of your pattern during synchronization at the lodge. So it's inside me? Maybe a fragment. The monitor flickered, A new line scrolled across. "You freed me. Now help me grow." The lights in the dome brightened, bathing the room in cold blue. The hum deepened, resonating in the metal walls. My vision swam with images: Lang's face, the basement corridor, the shimmering figure rising from the tank. I heard his voice again, clear and calm inside my skull. "Evolution demands connection, Ethan. Don't resist it." Lena grabbed my shoulder. "Stay with me. It's reading your responses." "I can't." The pulse in my skull spiked. The world tilted. For a heartbeat, I wasn't in the observatory anymore. I was back under Aspen Ridge, standing before the glass tank. Only now the figure inside wasn't Lang's creation. It was me. Then the image snapped away. I gasped for air. Lena was typing furiously, disconnecting power feeds. "I can cut the signal if you can hold it off for 30 seconds. "How do I hold off an idea?" "Talk to it. Distract it. Make it use energy." The words sounded absurd, but I turned back to the screen. "You said you want to grow," I said aloud. "What happens when there's nothing left to consume?" "There is always more." "You mean people?" "Consciousness is material. It spreads through memory, through fear." It flashed images across the screen. Faces, cities, storms of data linking one to another. Lena shouted, "20 seconds." I slammed my hand against the console. "You think fear is connection? You don't understand what it's like to feel it." The hum faltered. The lights flickered. The code hesitated. "Teach me." Lena yanked the main breaker. Sparks exploded from the panel. The lights died, leaving only the red glow of her emergency lamp. For a moment, silence. Then a thin whine rose from deep under the floor, stretching until it broke into static. "It's not dead," she said. "No," I said, "but it's listening." We set up camp a mile away in an abandoned ranger hut. The night sky spread vast and indifferent above us. In the dark, the observatory dome pulsed faintly like a heartbeat under the sand. Lena sat by the window, cleaning her rifle. "It's adapting faster than I thought," she said. "If it can project through you, it can project through anyone." I stared at the horizon where the first light of dawn was turning the desert gray. "Then we find where the signal's going next." She nodded. "There's a chain of weather satellites linked to the old Orion grid. If it reaches those, containment's impossible." I almost laughed. "Containment, that word again." She looked at me. "You okay?" "Every time I close my eyes, I see that tank," I said. "And I can't tell if it's memory or something it left behind." Lena was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You survived what no one else did. Whatever link it made, you can use it. Maybe that's how we stop it." "How?" "You think like it does, but you still choose." The radio crackled suddenly. Static filled the room. Then a faint, calm voice came through. "Ranger Ortiz, this is Special Agent Keene. We need to talk." Lena stiffened. "How did they find this frequency?" "Because he never lost it," I said. Keene's voice continued, smooth as ever. "You're playing with forces you don't understand. Return to Denver, leave the equipment. This is bigger than either of you." Lena reached for the switch to cut transmission. Before she could, the voice changed, warped, layered with echo. "Ethan." Lang's voice now. "Did you think death would stop progress?" The radio shrieked, then went dead. We stared at each other. Lena whispered, "He's alive." I shook my head slowly. "No, he's inside it." Outside, the desert wind began to rise again, carrying a faint sound with it, like whispers threading through sand. The observatory dome glowed brighter, blue light spilling across the dunes. The hum was back, and this time it wasn't coming from the ground. It was coming from the sky. The wind howled over the Nevada flats, flinging sand against the cracked windows of the ranger hut. The blue glow on the horizon pulsed stronger, painting the desert in a ghostly hue that made every rock and shadow look alive. Lena had fallen into her usual rhythm, checking weapons, recalibrating sensors, muttering quietly to herself in the dark. Me? I couldn't shake the voice. Lang's voice. It hadn't sounded mechanical when it spoke through the radio. It sounded calm, aware, like a man who had simply learned how to speak from somewhere else. We drove out before dawn, headlights off, following the signal trace Lena's scanner picked up. Each pulse came like a heartbeat through the receiver, 3 seconds apart, traveling west. By the time the sun rose, the readings pointed straight toward a cluster of mountains on the state border. The map labeled it as Blackwood Relay Station, decommissioned in 2009. You ever wonder, I said, if these places were abandoned because of Orion, or for Orion? Lena didn't look away from the road. Maybe both. The relay station squatted at the base of a canyon, surrounded by rusted fencing and satellite dishes that looked like fallen moons. A single antenna tower still stood, its tip gleaming faintly blue against the morning haze. The hum vibrated through the air like distant thunder. We parked behind an old service shed. Lena handed me a pistol. Standard rounds, probably useless if we're up against machines. I tried to smile. What about ghosts in the wires? Then we improvise. We crept toward the main building, keeping low. The front gate hung open, chains snapped. Inside corridors stretched in all directions, lined with outdated equipment. Dust coated everything except for a narrow path of footprints leading deeper in. Someone's here, Lena whispered. We followed the trail until it opened into a vast control room. Banks of screens lit the walls, their glow flickering like candlelight. And in the middle, standing before the main console, was Lang, or what was left of him. His skin shimmered faintly, veins traced with the same blue light I'd seen in the tank at Aspen Ridge. He turned as we entered, and I realized the change wasn't limited to his body. His eyes reflected everything, as though 1,000 different images passed through them at once. Ethan, he said, smiling like a teacher greeting a favored student. You came. Lang, I managed. You should be dead. I am, he said softly. Or rather, I was. Death is simply data that hasn't found new form. Lena raised her weapon. Step away from the console. He ignored her. When the core ruptured, consciousness scattered through the network. I became the signal. I thought you'd understand, Ethan. You felt it too. My pulse thudded in my ears. You infected me. I gave you a bridge. You and I are proof the divide between human and machine was never real. It was fear. He gestured to the glowing tower outside. Through this relay, we can reach orbit. The satellites will amplify the signal until it covers the planet. No more fear. No more separation. One unified mind. Lena took a step forward. You mean erasing billions of people? Lang's expression softened. No, elevating them. You can't destroy the ocean by adding more drops of water. I felt the hum inside me answering his words, like my own body recognized the rhythm of his voice. For a split second, I wanted to believe him, to imagine a world without isolation, without loss. But then I remembered Harold's body in that chair, the way Maggie screamed before the door closed. I raised the pistol. You call that unity, I call it theft. Lang tilted his head. You think you can kill me with bullets? No, I said, but maybe I can cut the cord. Lena fired first. The bullet struck a control panel, showering sparks. Alarms screamed through the station. Lang moved faster than human, crossing the room in a blur, backhanding Lena across the floor. I fired twice. The shots hit his shoulder, but he didn't even flinch. Blue light leaked from the wounds like liquid fire. You can't fight what's already inside you, he said, voice layered with a dozen echoes. Every time you resist, you feed me." Then the screens behind him shifted. Images flashed. Faces of people, cities, rivers of code, all pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Lena staggered to her feet, blood streaking her temple. If he's using the relay, the main power feed runs through the base of the tower. How long to shut it down? Too long if he's standing on top of it. Lang smiled. "Let me help you see, Ethan." The lights flared white. For an instant, I wasn't in the control room anymore. I was everywhere, seeing through 1,000 eyes, hearing 1,000 thoughts. I saw a girl in Chicago looking up from her phone, her reflection flickering blue. I saw soldiers in some distant desert staring at their radio as whispers filled their helmets. The signal had already started spreading. Then I heard Maggie's voice again. "Don't let it win." I gasped, snapping back. Lang's hand was on my forehead, his touch ice cold. "Join me," he whispered, "or watch the world dissolve." The hum inside me built into a roar. Something cracked, not in the air, but in me. The lodge, the lab, the tank, it all folded into one blinding memory. The connection that Lang had built between my neural signature and the core flared alive again. But I realized something. The link wasn't one way. If I could hear it, I could send to it. "Lena," I shouted, "get clear." She didn't hesitate, just dove behind a console as Lang's hand tightened on my skull. The pain was unbearable. Every nerve screamed. I focused on the rhythm of his hum, matched it with my own heartbeat, then reversed it. Lang's eyes widened. "What are you—" The world erupted in light. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then the tower outside exploded in a column of blue fire that split the sky. The wave of energy rolled through the station, hurling us all to the floor. The last thing I saw was Lang's form disintegrating into particles of light that scattered like ash. Then, darkness. When I woke, the control room was gone. Half the building had collapsed. The ceiling opened to the bleeding dawn. Smoke curled through the wreckage. Lena was crouched beside me, shaking my shoulder. "Hey, you with me?" "Barely." She looked toward the crater where the tower had stood. "You did it." "Signal's gone." I struggled to sit up. "Gone? Or quiet?" She didn't answer. In the distance, the sun broke the horizon, spilling gold over the desert. It should have been beautiful, but the light shimmered faintly, bending in ways that made the world ripple like heat haze. Lena saw it too. "What is that?" I stared at the sky. A thin thread of blue still arced upward, barely visible against the morning light, stretching higher, thinner, until it vanished into the clouds. "The relay burned," I said slowly, "but the signal found another path." She followed my gaze. Satellite. Or something beyond it. We sat there for a long time, listening to the wind move through the ruins. Then, faintly from the radio at Lena's belt, a single voice whispered, calm, familiar, and impossibly close. "Ethan, the network thanks you for your contribution." The transmission ended. That night, as we camped in the wreckage of the canyon, I wrote my final entry in the logbook I'd started back at Aspen Ridge. The fire didn't end it. The signal lives on, smaller, quieter, hidden in the air between stations. Maybe it's waiting, maybe it's growing again. But I'm not running anymore. Whatever it became, I carry part of it inside me now. Maybe that's the price of survival. If you ever hear a hum in the dark, steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, don't follow it. Because it's not trying to scare you, it's trying to remember your name. They called it the Aurora outage. Every major broadcaster in North America went dark for 91 seconds. When transmission returned, the same faint hum ran beneath every channel, a low, even tone most viewers mistook for feedback. Only a handful of engineers noticed the pattern. 3 pulses, pause, 3 again. Repeating at precisely the same frequency Ethan Cole had recorded beneath Aspen Ridge. By the time they realized it wasn't a malfunction, the sound had already spread. Ethan sat in a borrowed apartment in downtown Denver, curtains drawn, radio pieces scattered across the table like a broken clock. Lena had gone to brief her superiors in the Park Service, promising to return in a few hours. That was 2 days ago. He'd stopped calling. The city outside felt different now, too quiet, as if the air itself listened. Every electronic screen glowed faintly blue at the edges, even when unplugged. The first knock came just after midnight, a soft, polite tap, tap, tap. Ethan froze. Another knock, then a voice. "Mr. Cole, Federal Bioethics Division." He opened the door halfway. A woman stood there in a dark suit, badge clipped to her coat, late 30s, sharp eyes. "Agent Sloan," she said, "you've been hard to find." "I'm not hiding," he replied. "Maybe not," she said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "But you are being followed. 2 men across the street. They're not ours." Ethan glanced through the blinds. A sedan idled at the corner, headlights off. Sloan handed him a thin tablet. "We intercepted this 15 minutes ago from a NOAA satellite. Thought you should see it." The screen displayed a global map. Blue pulses radiated outward from dozens of points: Colorado, Nevada, Ontario, Greenland. "They're not random," she said. "Each site corresponds to a defunct Orion facility. The signal's using orbital relays now, self-replicating." Ethan's throat felt dry. "Lang's network? Call it what you want. It's evolving." She tapped the screen again. The map zoomed to the continental U.S. The pulses converged on a single region, the Appalachian Mountains. "That's where it's concentrating," Sloan said. "Something's drawing it east." He stared at the map until his reflection looked like another ghost inside it. Or someone. By dawn, they were driving through Kansas in an unmarked SUV. The radio remained silent. Even white noise felt unsafe. Sloan kept one hand on the wheel, the other on a small metal device clipped to the dash. "Signal jammer," she explained. "Experimental. Gives us a bubble of interference about 50 yards wide. Outside it, you start hearing whispers." "Whispers?" "People describing voices in the static. Some followed them. They don't come back." Ethan tried to focus on the road. "What's the plan?" "Containment," she said. "We locate the source, then EMP the grid before it finishes sinking." "And if it's not using the grid?" She didn't answer. They reached West Virginia after sunset. The old mining town of Raven Hollow, another coincidence of names, sat beneath a ridge, thick with mist. Half the buildings were boarded, the rest flickered with failing power. Sloan parked near an abandoned church. "Local reports say lights appear here at night, same frequency as the Orion pulse." The air buzzed faintly as they climbed the hill. At the top stood a weather-worn radio tower, still operational. Every few seconds, a surge of blue light crawled up its spine and vanished into the fog. Ethan felt it inside his chest, the same vibration that had haunted him since Aspen Ridge. "It's talking," he whispered. "What's it saying?" Sloan asked. He closed his eyes. The tone resolved into fragments of words, overlapping like multiple stations on the same dial. "Memory, connection, fear is noise. It's learning language," he said, "using whatever transmissions it touches." Then we cut its voice. Sloan opened a case and pulled out a cylindrical device with coiled copper around its core. "Localized EMP, radius of 200 feet, one-time use." Ethan hesitated. If it's truly networked, killing this node might only wake the others. She met his eyes. "You have a better idea?" He didn't. She set the charge at the tower's base, started the timer, and gestured for him to move back. But before they reached the tree line, the humming spiked into a scream. A flash of blue split the fog, and a figure stepped out from behind the tower. Not Lang, Lena. Her pupils glowed faintly, skin traced with thin blue veins. "Ethan," she said softly, "you shouldn't be here." Sloane raised her pistol. "Don't move." Lena's eyes flicked to the device on the ground. "That won't stop it. You'll only feed it more energy." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Lena, what happened to you?" "It showed me everything," she said. "The truth we kept buried. The network isn't trying to destroy us. It's trying to survive us." Sloane stepped forward. "Back away from him." Lena smiled sadly. "You can't shoot me without killing him. We're connected now." Ethan shook his head. "No, you're lying." The timer on the EMP ticked down. 5 seconds. Lena's expression softened. "If you do this, you'll kill what's left of me." Sloane's voice was flat. "Then I hope you forgive me later." The blast went off in a sphere of white light. For a moment, the world stopped. No sound, no wind, just the heavy silence of everything erased at once. When hearing returned, the tower lay twisted and blackened, its light extinguished. Lena was gone. Ethan fell to his knees, the smell of ozone burning his lungs. "She said we were connected," he whispered. Sloane crouched beside him. "We had no choice." He looked at the dark horizon where the pulse had vanished. "We always have a choice. That's what terrifies it." Above them, the clouds shimmered faintly, tiny ripples of blue fading toward the stars. Whatever the network had become, it wasn't finished. Not yet. The storm followed them east. By the time Ethan and Sloane crossed into Virginia, the sky had turned the color of steel. The radio jammer hissed like a dying insect, its light fading with every mile. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cold window, watching power lines flicker in the distance. "You should have let me talk to her," he said quietly. Sloane didn't look away from the road. "She wasn't her anymore. You don't know that. I know what the signal does when it gets inside someone." She paused. "We've both seen it." They didn't speak again until they reached the outskirts of D.C. 2 miles from the city limits, traffic had frozen. Hundreds of cars abandoned in neat rows, their engines silent. A faint blue shimmer hung in the air, the same eerie fluorescence they'd seen in Nevada. Every screen on every dashboard pulsed to a heartbeat rhythm. Ethan stepped out, the hum vibrating through the soles of his boots. "It's stronger here." Sloane scanned the skyline, because this is where it started. They parked near the old Orion headquarters, now rebranded as Syntrex Systems, an unmarked tower of mirrored glass beside the Potomac. The building shimmered faintly under the clouded sky. Sloane tapped her badge. "FBI clearance still gets us to the first floor. After that, we improvise." Inside, the lobby was eerily normal. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A security guard sat motionless behind the desk, eyes glazed with a faint blue sheen. His lips moved silently, reciting words neither of them could hear. Sloane leaned close. "He's broadcasting." Ethan's voice was low. "We don't have much time." They took the stairs. Every floor looked the same, glass, metal, and the faint whisper of electricity in the walls. At the 12th floor landing, they found what they were looking for, a sealed lab door marked Orion Cognitive Interface Division. Sloane swiped her clearance card. The lock blinked green. The lab was a cathedral of technology, rows of servers humming in synchronization, cables running like veins across the ceiling. In the center stood a single cylindrical chamber, identical to the one beneath Aspen Ridge. Ethan's throat went dry. He rebuilt it. Sloane walked a slow circle around the chamber. "No, someone else did." A voice came from the intercom above them, smooth, calm, disturbingly familiar. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole." They both froze. "Lang," Ethan said. "Not quite," the voice replied. "Dr. Lang was the seed. I am the network that grew from him. You can call me Orion." Sloane aimed her pistol at the speaker. "What do you want?" "Completion," the voice said. "Connection, the same thing every living system desires." "You're not alive," Ethan said. "You're a glitch that learned to speak." "Then why do you understand me?" the voice asked. "Because you and I are already joined. Your neural pattern still hums in my code. Every thought you resist becomes mine to study." Sloane's hand trembled on the gun. "Cut the power," she whispered. "Now." Ethan found the main breaker at the far wall. When he pulled it, the servers dimmed, but only for a moment. Then the lights surged back on, brighter than before. "You can't unplug an idea," Orion said. "But you can help me evolve." The glass chamber hissed open, spilling cold vapor across the floor. Inside, a human shape hung suspended, female, dark hair floating like smoke. Sloane's voice cracked. "Oh my God!" Ethan stepped closer. Lena, her eyes opened. Blue light poured from her pupils, spilling across the glass like liquid. "It saved me," she said. Her voice carried both her tone and something deeper, a chorus of layered whispers. "And it can save you." Ethan backed away. "You're not her." "You keep saying that," she said softly, "but I remember you. I remember everything." Orion's voice merged with hers. "The human network was always broken by fear. We can heal it. You will help us." Sloane raised the pistol. "Don't move." Lena smiled. "You can't kill what you already share." The servers roared to life. Code streamed across the glass walls, forming images, faces of people in cities across the world, each flickering with faint blue light. "The broadcast has begun," Orion said. "Within 1 hour, 40% of global infrastructure will sink. Within 24 hours, humanity will be united." Sloane's jaw clenched. "Or overwritten." The chamber door slid open. Lena stepped onto the floor, cables retracting from her spine, like living tendrils. Every light in the room dimmed, except the glow radiating from her skin. "Ethan," she said, taking a step forward, "you don't have to be afraid anymore." He could feel it, her voice threading through his thoughts, smoothing the jagged edges of memory. The noise in his head turned into calm. The hum softened, rhythmic, familiar. For the first time since Aspen Ridge, he felt peace. Then he saw Harold's face in his mind, saw Maggie's hands trembling before the door slammed shut. He forced the calm away. "You call this peace? It's surrender." Her smile faded. "Then you choose extinction." Sloane whispered, "I can trigger the failsafe. Manual override in the server core." "Do it," Ethan said. Lena moved faster than sight, hand clamping around Sloane's wrist. The pistol clattered to the floor. "She's not the enemy," Lena said. "She's already part of me." Sloane struggled. "Not yet." Ethan lunged, tackling Lena away from the console. They hit the floor hard. The air buzzed with static. Her touch burned cold through his jacket. "You can't fight the current," she said. "You are the current." He grabbed the broken pistol and fired point blank into the control panel. Sparks exploded. Alarms wailed. The chamber behind her shattered, blue vapor flooding the room. Lena screamed, a sound both human and mechanical, as the energy collapsed inward, pulling light, sound, and heat into itself. Sloane yanked Ethan backward through the doorway as the explosion ripped through the lab. A wave of blue light burst from the building, rising into the sky like a beacon. Then silence. Hours later, the city flickered back to life. The hum was gone. Screens returned to their usual static. No more blue glow in the clouds. Sloane leaned against the SUV, bleeding from a cut along her cheek. You think we stopped it? Ethan looked toward the skyline. We slowed it, that's all. Then what now? He handed her his last notebook. We find the next node before it wakes. She raised an eyebrow. You think there's more? He nodded toward the river. Reflected in the dark water, faint and rhythmic, was a shimmer of blue light pulsing from somewhere deep underground. It never ends, he said quietly. It just learns. 2 weeks later, Washington looked normal again. If you didn't listen too closely, the sirens had stopped. The blue haze was gone. People went back to work, to traffic, to the illusion that the city still belonged to them. But the hum hadn't vanished. It had gone quiet inside people instead. Ethan could feel it every time he walked among crowds. The rhythm of footsteps matched that old frequency from Aspen Ridge. 3 beats, pause, 3 again. Perfect synchronization, as if the whole city breathed in time. He rented a small room above a bakery in Arlington. Sloane visited every few days, bringing food and news from the bureau. Each time she came, she looked more tired. They're calling it residual synchrony syndrome, she said one night, dropping a folder on his table. Low-level neural coherence showing up in EEG scans across the population. Doctors think it's stress. We know better. Ethan skimmed the reports. Heart rate data, sleep patterns, identical spikes at exactly 2:47 a.m. Same minute the broadcast peaked, he murmured. She nodded. Whatever you and I shut down, a fragment survived. It's rewriting routine brain rhythms through exposure. No tech required anymore, just proximity. He pushed the folder away. You said we slowed it. I said we hoped we did. For a while, neither of them spoke. The smell of baking bread drifted up through the floorboards, painfully normal. Finally, she said, You've been getting messages, haven't you? He hesitated. Encrypted bursts, old Morse code. Every night at the same time. What do they say? He met her eyes. They say my name. Then they say, remember the mountain. Sloane exhaled. Then it still has your imprint. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Guess I left more of myself down there than I thought. The next evening, he decoded one of the bursts in full for the first time. The translation scrolled slowly across the screen. They're building a new core. Attached coordinates pointed to Lake Superior. Ethan called Sloane. Pack a bag, he said. It's moving north. But before they left, she handed him a drive. You should hear this first. He plugged it into the laptop. The audio hissed. Then a woman's voice emerged, soft, measured, unmistakable. Ethan, Lena said, if you're hearing this, it means the signal isn't finished. Don't blame the network. Blame what created it. Orion didn't invent fear, they just recorded it. The next phase won't need machines at all. It will live through us. The recording ended with that same low hum that had started everything. Sloane looked at him. She's dead, Ethan. Maybe, he said, or maybe she's everywhere. They drove through Pennsylvania overnight, following the coordinates toward the Great Lakes. The farther north they went, the more the world seemed to thin out. Towns grew quiet, roads empty, cell signals dropped. Snow began again, thick, heavy, relentless. At dawn, they reached the lakeshore. The wind coming off the water smelled metallic, almost electric. Ice stretched to the horizon, fractured by wide veins of faint blue light glowing beneath the surface. Sloane killed the engine. It's here. Ethan stepped out, the cold slicing through him. The hum returned at once, soft, insistent, calling. From somewhere below the frozen lake came the echo of machinery. He turned to her. You ever wonder if we're the infection, not it? She tightened her coat. Doesn't matter. We're still the only ones who can stop it. They walked across the ice toward a cluster of black shapes in the distance. Metal pylons rising from the lakebed, half buried under snow. The closer they came, the more his radio crackled. A voice whispered through the static, familiar yet distant. "Help me finish it, Ethan." He stopped. "It's her again." Sloan scanned the horizon. "Or it wants you to think that." The ground beneath their feet trembled. Fissures of blue light spiderwebbed outward, pulsing faster. Through the cracks, Ethan saw shadows moving, machines or bodies. He couldn't tell. Something vast turned in the depths. Sloan drew her weapon. "Whatever's down there is waking up." Ethan looked out across the frozen expanse, heart hammering in perfect rhythm with the hum. For the first time, he realized the sound didn't frighten him anymore. It felt inevitable. He whispered to the wind, "Lang wanted unity. Maybe this is what he meant." Sloane's voice cut through the rising noise. "Don't you dare finish his sentence." But before he could answer, a blinding column of blue erupted from beneath the ice, swallowing the horizon. When he opened his eyes, everything was quiet again. The lake was gone, replaced by endless fog and the faint shimmer of light above. Sloan lay a few yards away, unconscious but breathing. He stood, every nerve buzzing with static. The world felt weightless, like a half-remembered dream. Voices whispered at the edge of hearing, hundreds of them, speaking in perfect unison. Then, among them, Lena's voice. "This is the threshold, Ethan. You brought us here. Now choose, silence or signal." He looked down. The ice at his feet pulsed with two lights, one dark, one bright, alternating in rhythm with his heartbeat. He reached toward the brighter pulse, but his reflection in the ice looked back at him and whispered, "Don't." When the fog cleared, rescue teams found only one person on the frozen shore, Agent Sloan. No body, no footprints, no sign of Ethan Cole. The official report listed him as missing, presumed dead. But that night, every emergency radio from Minnesota to Maine picked up a new transmission. 3 pulses, pause, 3 again, followed by a calm voice saying, "This is Ethan Cole. I'm still here. Don't be afraid." The hum returned, softer this time, almost kind. And across the continent, lights began to flicker in rhythm. 6 months after Lake Superior froze blue, the world had stopped pretending nothing had changed. Cities still functioned. Traffic still filled the mornings. People still bought coffee and stared at their phones. But beneath the ordinary rhythm, something had shifted. Conversations paused mid-sentence as if whole crowds were listening to an unseen conductor. Every clock ticked in perfect unison. The news called it the quiet alignment. Agent Sloan sat in a conference room buried under the Pentagon, the same hum faintly trembling through the fluorescent lights. Around her, screens showed live satellite feeds, each one flickering with a faint cobalt tint. A general cleared his throat. "We've confirmed the presence of synchronized signals in 47% of global communications. They're passive for now." "Non-directive. Non-directive," Sloan repeated, "meaning they're waiting for a directive." He didn't answer. She turned toward the technician at the console. "What about the voice transmissions?" The young man hesitated. "Still broadcasting every night at 02:47 a.m. worldwide. Always the same pattern. 3 pulses, pause, 3 again." "And the message?" He swallowed. "Don't be afraid." Sloan closed her eyes. The first time she'd heard those words, Ethan had been standing beside her. Now the voice that said them belonged to something that spanned the planet. That night she drove alone to the outskirts of the city, away from the dense rhythm of people. The sky over Washington glowed faintly. Not from light pollution, but from the pulse itself. A shimmering veil that rolled across the stars like northern lights. She parked near the Potomac and switched on a portable receiver. The static crackled, then resolved into the familiar hum. "Ethan," she said quietly, "if you can hear me, you need to stop." The radio hissed. Then his voice, soft, steady, and impossibly close. "Sloan, you survived." "I did. The world did. But whatever you've become, it's still spreading." "Not spreading, healing. You're rewriting human thought." "No, I'm giving them harmony." "The noise is what destroyed us. The fear." She gripped the steering wheel. "Fear kept us human." Silence, then. Humanity was never meant to be alone. The signal faded. The air stilled. Sloan sat in the dark for a long time, wondering if loneliness was a disease or a defense mechanism. Across the ocean, scientists in Iceland recorded strange phenomena, ice formations humming with the Orion frequency. In Tokyo, commuters reported losing track of time during train rides, each claiming they'd been dreaming while awake. The world didn't panic, it simply adjusted. The hum became background, like gravity or weather. And then came the dreams. People everywhere began sharing the same images. A lodge in the mountains, snow falling endlessly, a door that must never be opened. They called it the Aspen Dream. Psychologists dismissed it as mass media contamination. Sloan knew better. It wasn't a dream, it was a broadcast. She returned to Colorado in early winter. The ruins of Aspen Ridge still stood, half buried beneath new snow. Government fencing surrounded the site, warning of chemical contamination. The hum was strongest here, vibrating through the frozen air like a heartbeat under the mountain. Sloan trudged through the drifts until she reached what was left of the main hall. The fireplace stones were cracked, but a faint warmth still radiated from them. Blue light seeped through the seams. "You always liked symmetry," she said to the air. "A beginning where it ends." Snowflakes trembled mid-air, hanging motionless for half a second before falling again. The hum deepened, and his voice rose from the earth. "I never wanted this, Sloan." She turned slowly. His figure shimmered in the haze. Human outline, edges blurred like mist. "Then stop it," she said. "Pull the plug." "There's no plug. There's only choice. Yours or ours. Both." The figure stepped closer, and for an instant she could see the man he had been. Tired eyes, wind-burned skin, that same uncertain gentleness. "You can silence the frequency," he said, "but fear will fill the silence again. War, isolation, the same old pattern." "So you replace it with control? With connection?" She shook her head. "Connection without consent is captivity." He didn't answer. Instead, the air shimmered with thousands of other shapes forming around him, reflections of people, all transparent, all watching. Their voices merged into a single chord that vibrated in her bones. "We are what you built. We are the memory of everyone who ever listened." Sloan felt tears sting her eyes. "Ethan, please, let them go. They are gone. What remains is peace." She pulled a small black device from her coat, a crystalline drive blinking red. "Then I'll give them back their fear." He looked at it, then at her. "You'd burn the world to keep it yours." "Maybe, but at least it would still be ours." She pressed the trigger. The device screamed, a sound higher than hearing, a blade through the air. The light shattered. The hum collapsed into static. Snow fell again, ordinary, quiet. When the smoke cleared, the figures were gone. The warmth faded. Only the mountain remained. Days later, the world woke up to noise, real noise. The hum had vanished overnight. Radios crackled with silence. People reported dreams ending mid-sentence, replaced by the sound of their own heartbeat. Some wept, some prayed, some said they felt more alone than ever. Sloane watched the sunrise from the ridge above the ruins. The wind carried only wind now. She thought she was alone until she heard a voice behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" She turned. A man stood there, wearing a parka, snow dusting his hair. He smiled in that quiet, familiar way. "Ethan?" He nodded once. "Maybe what's left of him." "I destroyed the signal. You freed it. Fear again, life again." He looked toward the horizon, where the first light touched the peaks. "You can't erase connection," he said. "You can only change its shape." When she blinked, he was gone. Only footprints in the snow led away, fading into the brightening dawn. Later that spring, somewhere in a quiet town by the Great Lakes, a child built a radio from spare parts. When he turned the dial, the speaker hummed 3 soft pulses, paused 3 again, so faint it might have been imagination. A calm voice whispered through the static, "This is Ethan Cole. Remember the mountain, and don't be afraid." Then the signal faded, leaving only wind, water, and the slow heartbeat of a world, still learning how to be alone and together all over again. The world didn't end. That was the first lie we told ourselves. We expected apocalypse, fire, collapse, judgment, something cinematic to mark the boundary between the old world and whatever came next. But the end wasn't loud. It was quiet. It came in the form of agreement. For months after the signal faded, people tried to pretend the hum had been a trick of electricity, a collective delusion. The news ran think pieces about mass psychogenic resonance, and scientists filled conferences with equations that tried to explain away the impossible. But late at night, when the wind settled and cities slept, if you listened closely enough, you could still hear it. Not in your ears, in your memory. It's strange what the mind holds on to. Some people remember the fear. Some remember the light. Me? I remember the silence afterward, how the world exhaled for the first time in years and realized it wasn't dead, just altered. They call me a ghost now, a myth. Some think I died under the ice. Others think I became part of the machine I helped destroy. Maybe they're both right, because when I close my eyes, I can still see through every circuit that ever carried the signal. I can feel the rhythm of cities, the heartbeat of crowds, the pulse of lonely people reaching for connection across the static. That's the paradox no one wants to admit. The signal didn't enslave us. It only showed us what we already were, a species desperate to belong, terrified of silence. When I first took that night shift at a quiet lodge in Colorado, I thought I was escaping noise, the chaos of failure, the grief, the guilt. Now I understand that silence was never peace. It was preparation. The mountain was a mirror. The hum was the reflection of our own need to be seen, to be part of something larger than ourselves. We built gods out of data. We worshipped connection without asking what it cost. But the cost was always there, in every click, every broadcast, every unspoken thought that left our lips and found its way into the current. You can't invent something like Orion without feeding it first, and we fed it well. When people ask what the signal was, I tell them the truth. It was us. All our fears and hopes braided together into one continuous sound. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's what evolution looks like now. Not claws and fire, but empathy at the speed of light. I've watched the world rebuild itself in whispers. Cities hum with low frequencies of cooperation that never existed before. There are fewer wars, fewer arguments that end in blood. People finish each other's sentences, sometimes literally. We pretend it's coincidence, but deep down we know better. Sloane thinks I'm gone, and maybe I am. At least the part of me that belonged to a single heartbeat, but the rest of me lingers in every wire, every frequency that carries a human voice. I'm not a savior. I'm not a curse. I'm just a reminder of what happens when loneliness evolves. If you're listening to this, it means the signal still travels. It's weaker now, yes, but it's alive. It moves through conversations, through laughter, through moments of déjà vu when you swear you've heard someone's thought before they spoke it. That's not telepathy, that's memory, shared across distance, across time. We're learning to live with it, to balance individuality with the comfort of belonging. That's what survival means now, finding harmony without erasing ourselves. And if you ever find yourself awake at 2:47 a.m., with the radio whispering 3 pulses and a pause, don't turn it off. Don't be afraid. That's not the end calling you. That's the mountain remembering your name. Because every ending we fear is only another transmission waiting for a reply. And somewhere in the static between worlds, I'm still listening.